Alright, every pony. I know I didn't upload a video yesterday, but well, that's completely my fault. I had lots of free time and just didn't feel like doing it. So kill me. This is going to be the beginning of chapter 3, which doesn't look as long as the other ones, so I might be able to do this in one go. I don't know. Here we go. Wonderbolts. Yeah. Rainbow Dash whispered quietly, sound asleep on her makeshift cloud bed in the sky. She was sprawled out on her back, a small dab of drool hanging off of the corner of her smiling mouth as she dreamed of finally becoming a Wonderbolt and performing the most spectacular stunts at an air show. As she slept, the quiet night air around her produced a cool, soothing breeze that ever so softly brushed against her mane and coat, relaxing the Pegasus while already in a deep sleep. Her legs kicked slightly, and her wings flinched and fluttered, seeming to try to mimic the events in her dream. Dash was in her ultimate happy place, and nothing but the morning sun would wake her from this pleasant slumber. Well, the only exception to this is apparently the one who raises the sun itself. As Celestia hurriedly flew through the sky and sped right past the cloud Rainbow Dash was asleep on, causing an abrupt and strong gust of wind that nearly topped her off the cloud. Dash awoke, most annoyed that her deep sleep, and most importantly of all, her wonderful dream, had been interrupted. She fumbled slightly to get on her hooves and quickly looked around, just catching the dark figure speeding away from her. "Why, that little—" Dash said to herself, assuming it was some pony that purposely woke her up to mess with her. Without much thought, Dash quickly flared out her wings and gave chase to the already distant black figure. Before long, Dash had already begun catching up to the figure, its legs and tail clearly visible yet still distant. Though, as she drew closer, Dash took notice that the figure ahead of her was larger than the normal size of any Pegasus pony she knew. Furthermore, the tail was different. It seemed to be lightly sparkling as if it fluttered in the wind, unlike anything she had seen before. Except, why would Princess Celestia be here in Ponyville at night? Dash thought to herself, quickly realizing the identity of the figure that she was chasing. She contemplated the possibility that it had something to do with Twilight Sparkle, but the idea essentially deteriorated as she realized they were heading towards Sweet Apple Acres. This not only confused Rainbow Dash, but also changed her mind from confronting the pony to following her, out of sight hopefully, to find out what was going on. The figure that was apparently Princess Celestia approached Sweet Apple Acres and began to slow down gradually. Soon, she landed inside the property right beside the main farmhouse, and instead of walking to the front, she seemed to begin lurking into the covers of the leaves and peeking out to get a good look. It sure was the princess, all right. She could tell by the presence of the large horn on her head coupled with the wings she used to fly. Celestia slowly trotted around the building, inspecting the windows and walls as she went. Then, she took flight and ascended to the second floor, peering into each of the windows one by one. Finally, she began to take interest in one window in particular, even going as far as poking her head inside to look around. Finally, she slowly slipped inside and out of her view of vision. Eager to see what was going on, Dash quietly flew towards the house and swooped around just under the windowsill of where Celestia entered, a small light now shining inside. As she leaned her ear closer, she began to hear soft voices coming from inside. "Where are they?" one voice asked, sounding slightly hoarse while at the same time seeming very eager. I read that wrong. I don't know, ma'am," the other voice said, the voice of a colt. It was Big Macintosh. "Please, what's wrong?" Rainbow Dash poked her head up, daring a look into the room. "I want you to tell me where they are. Right now," Celestia ordered, now clear to Rainbow Dash that she had Big Mac pinned on his back. It seemed that as though he was on the bed of his bedroom with light emanating from Celestia's horn. "I know you keep up with your sister's whereabouts. Now tell me where they've gone," she hissed. "Wait. I mean, she said something about going to one of her friend's places, but..." Celestia was obviously getting impatient, judging by how her face suddenly sprung closer to Big Mac's as her eyes grew larger. "Where did she go?" Celestia growled. Rainbow Dash reared back slightly. This wasn't the Celestia she knew. Something had happened to her. Or something was controlling her, maybe. Whatever it was, she didn't know, but she did know that she had to go warn Twilight and the others before something happened. She went to Pinky's place. Yep. They went to that there sugar cube corner. Interesting. I'll have to look into it. But first, Celestia suddenly began to descend upon Big Mac, her belly now just touching the top of his. This is gonna be hot. I think I should have myself a bit of taste before I go. Rainbow Dash gasped, but then quickly shoved the hoof in her mouth to forcefully silence herself. But it was too late. Celestia heard the noise and quickly raised her head, taking only a split second to make eye contact with Dash. Dash reared back, and after a short, "Oh no," she quickly turned tail and flew as fast as she could in the opposite direction. Celestia quickly got off Big Mac and "Aww, I was looking forward to that," and quickly began pursuit of her, leaving the large colt alone in the bed. Rainbow Dash is an incredibly fast flyer, often credited as probably the fastest flyer in all of Equestria. Even so, the powerful wings on Celestia's back allowed her to keep up with the speedy Rainbow Dash. Even when flying at full speed, Dash looked back, seeing that Celestia was hot on her tail and not letting up. Faster and faster Dash went, but regardless of her speed, Celestia stayed right behind her, now seeming to catch up. Dash's mind raced. She needed to think of a way out, a way to shake her off, to lose her somehow. She needed to go somewhere with a lot of obstacles, somewhere dangerous that Celestia might be too big to move through safely. Someplace like, the Everfree Forest! Dash yelled in her mind, the idea suddenly sparking up. Adjusting her course, she quickly began speeding off towards the Everfree Forest, which was not only a few seconds away. Dipping down almost to the ground, Dash zoomed in under the tree line with Celestia right behind her, zipping in through bushes and around branches and trees, pulling off every trick she knew to try and get the deranged princess off of her tail. The fact that she was still going nearly top speed through the forest was not a feat by skill alone, but also by foolhardy luck, as every opening she passed through had just the right arrangement of trees for her to be able to barely swerve and swivel past the bark-covered obstacles. Amazingly, Celestia herself had also passed through every obstacle, despite her size, and was still gaining. She was now only about 10 to 15 yards behind Rainbow Dash. Suddenly, Dash lost sight of the princess, as if she had either slowed down, flown above the tree line, or accidentally ran into an obstacle. "Yes!" she thought to herself, praising her luck as she continued to look back to see if she could see the princess still behind her. But with her attention directed away from where she was going, Dash accidentally flew straight into a large bundle of vines hanging low under a tree branch, snagging her almost instantly and pulling her to a complete stop. "Ah, what the—" Rainbow Dash cried out, hastily inspecting the vines that now kept her in place. Quickly she began to struggle, but her plunge into the bundle had somehow gotten her exquisitely tangled up. She then suddenly heard a twig break and some leaves rustle, and as she looked up, there was Celestia, walking proudly towards Rainbow Dash with her horn now beginning to shine in the magical light. The deranged princess looked straight at Dash, who looked straight back, their gazes fixated on each other's, just as before. Celestia's beady eyes took hold of Rainbow Dash and froze her in place with the mix of shock, fear, and ultimate confusion as to what to do now. As Celestia approached, a new glow took shape around her horn as the vines that bound Rainbow Dash began to shift. Sliding around her body and settling in restraining positions around her waist, her neck, the junction of her flank and her lower legs, and at the joint directly above the hoof. The vines tightened and pulled Rainbow Dash's limbs apart, exposing her body fully and laying it out directly in front of the princess. There, Dash lay completely restrained and unable to move, her wings batting furiously until a couple more vines came and tied them up as well. Her body was pointing straight up, her limbs pulled widely apart, and her wings now held open and stiff like a display before the princess. Slowly, Celestia approached, her menacing grin once more widening and another drop of drool beginning to slide down from her lip. Dash's struggling soon came to a halt, unable to move now from the overwhelming combination of shock and fear she was feeling. Gently, Celestia raised one of her hooves, placed it at the bottom of Rainbow Dash's neck, and slowly began to slide it down her body. "Gotcha." When Luna came to the hallway leading up to Celestia's bedroom, she found half of the guards unconscious, and the other half still groggy and trying to help the others up. "They must have been knocked out from Celestia crashing through them," Luna thought to herself. Quickly, she approached the nearest guard and began inspecting it for injuries while helping him get up. Her horn lit up, and the simple rejuvenation spell began to work on the first guard, slowly bringing him back to his senses. As she looked around, there were still another 20 or so guards that needed to regain consciousness. This is gonna take a while, Luna spoke to herself. Celestia! Rainbow Dash yelped. That sounded very manly. Rainbow Dash yelped, unable to handle this intense sensation that was currently bolting through her body. Celestia had her hooves slid around Rainbow Dash's sides, holding her closer while straining the vines further. Her hair was wet and slick, having just been pulled out of Dash's mouth. So wrong. Out of Dash's mouth and was now split into two parts, each part rubbing itself against the entire length of Dash's wings and coaxing every feather. Celestia's face was pressed up against Dash while it was maneuvered around her body, her lips gliding over her tummy while her tongue slithered down between her haunches and back up to her lips against Dash's stomach. Her tongue worked fast, yet kept up a steady rhythmic patter, lapping and twisting over Rainbow Dash's coat, careful to reach over every part of her body and tantalize it with just the right touch. Rainbow Dash's body was shaking, her blood running hot from the overwhelmingly pleasurable sensation running through her. Her tongue draped out over her while she panted out madly. Each pulse from the rhythm sent another wave of pleasure spreading around inside of her like an out-of-control wildfire. Dash couldn't take it. She couldn't explain what exactly she was feeling or exactly how Celestia was doing it, but the entire experience had made her feel better than she did when she won the Best Young Flyers competition. As if that wasn't enough, Celestia's next move surprised Rainbow Dash as much as it did pleasure her. Ooh. Celestia raised up the back of her head while still keeping her muzzle up close to Dash's tummy, and pointed her horn straight up to her mouth. Without any warning, the horn was stuffed into Dash's mouth, and slid up to her throat, Dash beginning to gag on it lightly. Oh. The horn's glow also changed, this time to a more pinkish color as it forced a magical sensation through Dash's lips and mouth, causing her to feel a most daunting pleasure that nearly forced her to begin sucking and lathering the horn with her tongue. Though the entirety of the horn itself could not fit in Dash's mouth. This is hot, especially at such an angle. It allowed her to at least let her tongue and lips massage around the tip. While she sucked, Dash's hips began to buck up against Celestia's muzzle. Oh, God. I don't know if I can read the rest of this without commenting on every little thing. Moving to the rhythm that was already present and now making the effects of the movements of her lips and tongue amplified. This continued on for several more minutes before Rainbow Dash's body, although athletically rounded and very much in shape, finally reached its endpoint with its session. Dash released the lips from her mouth and let her head fall back, gasping loudly as her limbs went limp and her muscles relaxed. She panted heavily, drool dripping down from her lips while her entire body was covered with the wetness from Celestia's tongue. She finally passed out soon after releasing her mouth from the horn, drifting off into a deep, exhausted sleep. Celestia pulled back slowly. The energy in this pony was all used up now. She gently released her magical influence on the vines, and let them and Rainbow Dash slump to the ground. Taking this time to think, Celestia then began to contemplate Twilight's location once more. They weren't at the Apple House, and Celestia knew they weren't at Sugar Cube Corner, because surely she would have been with Pinkie Pie when she came out and followed her. That left her with two options now, and she chose first Rarity's Carousel Boutique. After taking another moment to look at the result of her work on the rainbow-maned Pegasus, Celestia turned around and flew out of the forest, heading straight for Rarity's house. So what would you girls like to do next? How about some sort of scary story? Twilight asked, cheerfully glancing between Rarity and Applejack. Oh, that sounds interesting, dearie, but I'm really not so big on scary stories, Rarity replied. How about you, Applejack? Don't you have some sort of mare's tail from the barn? Well, Applejack said, a hoof on her chin as she took a moment to think. Actually, I think I do. Heck, this one will be scary enough to knock your socks off. Sounds great, Applejack. Let's hear it, Twilight said, eager to hear the story. The three ponies were circled around a magically lit lantern in the center of Rarity's bedroom. They were all lying on a pillow with a blanket draped over each of them, while lightly snacking on some s'mores and other light treats. As Applejack progressed through the story, the other two ponies became noticeably frightened. Twilight having her mouth bit onto a part of a pillow while Rarity was lightly shaking. And then there was a sound of hoof steps tottering on the floor. Tap, 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 Applejack said, focusing on the story. Little old Blessy Bean listened closely, but after a few moments, there was suddenly a loud knock on the barn door. Without warning, there was a loud knock coming from downstairs, causing both Rarity and Twilight to jump up with the scream. Rarity? I think that's actually some pony at your door, Applejack said, giving a slightly confused look. Oh, well, okay then. I guess I'll go have a look, she replied, fixing her hair slightly from it getting a bit frizzled from the recent scream. Her and the other two followed, slowly making their way down the stairs and to the front door as it once again knocked loudly. Who in all of Equestria could be knocking at my door at this time of night? Rarity thought to herself as she approached the door. Using her magic, she turned the knob and opened the door to whoever it was outside. As it opened, all three of the ponies gasped at the figure who stood at the entrance, its face different than they had ever seen it before. End part 3. Okay, so sorry for interrupting the story like 11 times during that erotic Celestia x Rainbow Dash Celestia Dash scene. That was a bit steamy, so I couldn't resist.